I haven't used an iPad in years. It never felt like it fit into my workflow between my MacBook, iPhone, and ultra-wide setup. But when the iPad Air 5 dropped with the new integrated M1 chip, I had to take a look. A month later, not only am I impressed with the new iPad Air, I also think I finally found a productive place for a tablet in my daily devices that I use. Hey friends, Andrew here, hope you're well. In today's video, let's explore whether or not the new iPad Air is worth it, what the differences are to the previous iPad Air, and how it stacks up to the iPad Pro, and why I even bought an iPad/tablet in the first place to fit into my daily workflow and daily desk setup. So there's a number of color finishes you can go with this year, and the blue is quite appealing in person. Though being the vanilla person that I am, I settled on, of course, space gray. I stuck with the Wi-Fi only model because I plan to tether via my iPhone for internet access anyway. But maybe most controversially, I went with a smaller 64GB configuration, and these specs will cost you $599. And this leads me to start with the negatives and pitfalls with the new iPad Air first. So let's address the small storage space. Frankly, if you're going to be using your iPad frequently, the 64GB isn't going to work for most people. iPad OS takes up to 8GB alone, which gives you only 56GB to work with from the get-go out of the box. Sync it up with your existing photos, download a few apps or even movies, and you'll fill up your storage space as soon as you've unboxed it. Your only other option is the 256GB upgrade, which is fortunately only a $150 upgrade. So then you're probably wondering why I even bothered with the 64GB version, right? I think the 64GB version does work for some depending on how you plan to use your iPad Air in the first place. For me, this device is not the primary workhorse. It's an extension of both my MacBook and my iPhone, which are my true daily drivers that I use, every day in and out. I won't be loading any intensive apps onto this iPad. Most of the apps that I do have on here are quite minimal, and that's how I like it. Most of the work that I'll get done on this iPad will be cloud-based anyway, from reading documents on Google Drive to editing photos on Lightroom and just browsing YouTube. I'll go into more detail about how I'm using this iPad to boost productivity and how it integrates into my work setup, desk setup later on in this video. But yeah, if most of what you're doing is on the cloud and the iPad Air is just an extension of your tech that you'll be using, save yourself the $150, the 64GB is manageable. Moving on to the other letdowns, the battery I found is just okay. Don't get me wrong, it's no slouch, but it's not spectacular either. Of course, Apple never officially releases their exact battery sizes for almost all of their devices, but they do share a battery life estimate, and it's 10 hours of general use, the exact same as the previous iPad Air and base iPad 2. On my testing, which includes web surfing, YouTube videos, Lightroom editing, emails, and some light gaming, the iPad held up just shy of 10 hours. In real life use though, which was a few hours of daily use in between all my devices, it held up fine for a couple days before it needed a charge. And with a 20-watt charging block and USB-C cable, it took about 2 hours to get to a full charge. Overall, not too shabby considering it now powers an M1 chip, but it's definitely no marathon runner. The other two letdowns are, and this may be a little picky, the fact that Face ID and ProMotion are absent. I get it, Apple does need to differentiate their Pro line to the Airs, but there's still enough differentiation in my opinion if the screen was to get ProMotion. It's just a little hard to go from ProMotion to non-ProMotion when you get used to it. And I'm sure eventually later down the track, Apple will standardize ProMotion across their product lineup at some point in time. I just thought it was time for the iPad Air to step up to 120Hz refresh rate. At least that's what I was hoping. But hey, you win some and you lose some. This leads us onto the differences between the new iPad and the Pro. And frankly, there aren't too many, especially now the iPad Air features the M1 processor. For starters, you do get a nicer screen on the Pro, a liquid XDR display with ProMotion and slightly higher peak brightness. You then also have a superior dual rear camera with LiDAR, which I'm still on the fence with when it comes to usefulness. And finally, you have the choice of the larger 12.9-inch display and up to 2 terabytes of storage and 16 gigabytes of RAM in comparison to the 8 gigs we get with the iPad Air. It's insane how feature-packed the new iPad Air is, and at the core is the inclusion of that M1 processor. The iPad Air is now officially the cheapest device you can buy from Apple with an M1 processor included, and it's everything we've come to expect from the M1 processors: fast, efficient, and integrated. The iPad does not stutter at all, even with intensive features like multitasking, split screen, and raw photo editing in Lightroom. Everything is buttery smooth. It's also now able to take on just about any task or app with absolute ease, and it also future-proofs the iPad Air for some time to come purely because of that M1 processor. Let's not forget about mobile gaming too with the M1. It runs so nicely on the new chip, and it looks really nice on the 10.9-inch screen, just like Call of Duty Mobile here. I can imagine setting this up on the plane with a controller, and you essentially have a portable gaming console. And also surprisingly, I had a KD ratio of 12 on my first round of Nuketown on this game. It's really no surprise that M1 is a big draw card for this thing here, but I do think it's actually quite generous of Apple to include the M1 chip. In this case, it was a big selling point for the Pro, and so to add it to a non-Pro Apple product such as the iPad Air here at such a low price point, sub $1,000, is a big move. Right now though, it just feels like an M1 is kind of overkill for the iPad Air and iPad OS, but we can't forget about the future. Who knows what functionality we'll get in future renditions of iPad OS, or maybe, who knows, even Mac OS on this iPad. The front camera is a big leap forward from the previous. It's now a very nice 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, and when taking selfies or on video calls, it's very evident it's crispier, far more detailed, and highlights aren't blown out. When paired up with the Apple's new center stage feature, video calls are pretty brilliant on the iPad Air. If you don't know what center stage is, it's basically a feature that helps people remain in focus while on a video call. So if you move to one side of the frame, it will pan over to you and do its best to keep you in the center of the frame. As for the rear facing camera, it's still the usual 12 megapixel camera, and it does the job if you need to take a quick snap and the iPad is all you have. When it comes to its design, it's identical to the iPad Air 4, which isn't an issue at all. It remains premium and elegant. The glossy sheen of the space gray on the back is beautiful as its minimalistic look overall. It's super thin, light, portable, and still lacks a headphone jack, which I guess we're all used to at this point. It looks amazing accompanying any workspace, bedroom, or even lounge room. I have it paired up with the coveted 2nd gen Apple Pencil, which cost $129, but is worth every penny. Yes, it's aimed at creatives and digital artists, but you can mark up documents and jot down notes if you enjoy a good old notepad and pencil setup. I quite appreciate the design and build of the Apple Pencil, and of course the seamless wireless charging you get by magnetically snapping onto the side of the iPad Air. Not only does this keep the Apple Pencil charged at all times, but it also makes it super convenient to grab and use whenever inspiration strikes. It's also worth mentioning for those who purchased the Cellular version, the previous iPad generation supports Wi-Fi 6 as does the new current iPad Air, but we now also get the addition of 5G on the Cellular models. Just be wary though, it's not the Wave version of 5G as seen on the iPad Pro, so what this means is you're going to get slightly slower speeds in comparison, but regardless, it's still really nice to see 5G integrated in. So I think it's pretty clear, the iPad Air 5 is a great purchase at the price point, particularly with the inclusion of the M1 chip. But what about for those who already have enough devices in their life and are considering an iPad or a tablet in general? What's the point of an iPad, especially if you already have mobile devices. I personally have my iPad set up on my desk right next to my docked MacBook and ultra-wide screen. The lifesaver here is Apple's Sidecar, which allows you to use an iPad as a secondary display for your Mac. It's surprisingly useful for views of widgets, monitoring the stock market, or even leaving videos running in the background. It helps that I have it paired up to my Keychron mechanical keyboard for a seamless desk experience. I also find myself grabbing the iPad on the go when I want to change my environment or work remotely on easy tasks like answering emails from the cafe, reading documents at the park, or even taking video calls. For those who value portability without sacrificing power and screen space, the iPad Air 5 really does deliver at an amazing price point, and it even complements existing desktop setups if you can find room for it. So I bought this iPad as someone who hasn't used one in so many years because I just didn't find a use case for it. But after using this for a month, I've found new value and appreciation for the iPad, not just because it's a beast with the M1 chip at its price point, but it genuinely is a great piece of portable tech to have on my desk and out and about. So here's my overall take on this thing. If you're new to the world of iPads and you're not a fully fledged creative professional, this iPad is the one to get over the iPad Pro. This one's already so powerful with the M1 in it. The build and portability is an obvious selling point as the Air, and the price point is at a sweet spot. I'd even argue that you may want to consider this over an entry-level MacBook depending on what your needs are, and maybe particularly if you're a student. And who knows how the iPad OS will evolve over the years. Now we have the M1 chip in this iPad Air, we essentially have a future-proofed Apple device that should see support for many years to come. At $599, there's really not much to complain about here. Sure, we could have promotion and the battery life could be slightly better, but all in all, it's very hard to fault this new iPad Air over the last month. Currently, Apple seems to be doing a lot right ever since their new M1 chip dropped, and if this is a sign of what's to come, I cannot wait to dive deeper into the Apple ecosystem. If you do already own an iPad, let me know if you find it as useful as I do. It's interesting to come back to an iPad after years and years of going without one. Also, if you liked the custom wallpaper here on the iPad, let me know in the comments below. They're actually a custom made 3D render on Blender, and I'll drop a pack of desktop and mobile wallpapers if you guys want them and like them. If you made it this far in the video, make sure you drop the code word Affinity, drop a like, and subscribe for everything tech and business. As always, thank you for watching.